Thank you for joining this video session of 401k Fridays. Today's topic is acing your 401k discrimination testing. The key objectives today are to help provide you an overview of discrimination testing, help you understand how discrimination testing works, provide you some questions to ask your administrator if you're failing discrimination testing, and some basic and advanced strategies to help you improve testing results. By way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rick Unser, and I'm a Vice President and ERISA Risk Management Consultant at Locked-In Retirement Services. I've been a retirement consultant since 1997 and have earned the professional designations of a Qualified Plan Financial Consultant and a Chartered Retirement Plan Specialist. My clients are companies with several hundred to several thousand employees who sponsor qualified retirement plans. I created 401k Fridays as a collection of resources for employers who sponsor retirement plans to provide them with strategic, timely, and educational content to help improve their retirement plans. As a brief overview, 401k discrimination testing came about shortly after 401k plans were introduced in the early 1980s. Discrimination testing originated with the Tax Reform Act of 1984 and then was further amended in 1986. Not much happened until the Small Business and Jobs Protection Act of 1996 introduced the concept of safe harbor. This gave employers the ability to pass their discrimination tests by offering a prescribed match and a prescribed vesting schedule. Then some minor changes came in with EGTRA in 2001, which introduced the concept of a catch-up contribution, Roth 401ks, and higher contribution limits. In the end, discrimination testing helps evaluate whether the plan unduly benefits owners and/or highly compensated employees in your organization. We'll talk more about highly compensated employees in just a second. There are many tests which need to be performed as part of your discrimination testing. The most problematic tests, and the real focus of this video, will be the actual deferral percentage, or ADP test, and the actual contribution percentage, or ACP test. There are several other tests that you can see on this page which you have to go through, most of which will pass with some exceptions from time to time. Your role in discrimination testing is fairly simple. You need to provide a year-end employee census to your administrator who's going to be performing your testing, and that's generally required by the end of January if you're on a calendar planned year. Allow your administrator to process the data and then review the test results. If your test passes, go ahead and celebrate a little bit, but understand your results. Make sure that you are in good shape to pass in years coming. If your tests fail, you'll need to take corrective action, and that's usually one of two things. One, you'll need to return excess contributions to your highly compensated employees. There's a March 15 deadline to accomplish that. Or number two, make an employer contribution to the plan to satisfy the test. This is generally going to be in the form of a QNEC or qualified non-elective contribution. To get your arms around the basics of 401k discrimination testing, it first helps to define some terms. First, and one of the more important things, is defining a highly compensated employee. In 2016, a highly compensated employee is anyone with $120,000 or more in prior year earnings. Again, the key word here is prior year. So we're doing testing in 2016 for the 2015 plan year. So for someone to be considered a highly compensated employee in 2015, they would have to have earned $120,000 or more in 2014. Also, someone can be a highly compensated employee if they're a 5% owner of the business, and this is regardless of compensation, or if they're a family member of a 5% owner of the business. At this point, you might be saying, well, Rick, this is great information, but why is there a bridge over water on the page? Well, one of the things that was explained to me very early on, which helped me get my arms around discrimination testing, was it's kind of like a bridge running over water. The bridge is the actual deferral percentage, or ADP, of your highly compensated employees. And the water represents the actual deferral percentage of your non-highly compensated employees. So let's talk about non-highly compensated employees for just a second. For 2016, that's going to be anyone with earnings less than $120,000. They're not a 5% owner of the business, not a family member of a 5% owner of the business, or this could be their first year earning over $120,000. Remember, you have to have earned $120,000 in the year prior to be considered a highly compensated employee. So if this is someone's first time earning $120,000, they're not going to be considered a highly compensated employee for that year's test. So coming back to our bridge and water for a second, the highly compensated employee deferrals are the bridge. The non-highly compensated employee deferrals are the water. When we run the tests, the key thing that we're looking to accomplish here is to determine how big is the gap between the actual deferral percentage of the highly compensated employees and the actual deferral percentage of the non-highly compensated employees. There is allowed to be a gap, hence bridge running over water. However, if the gap gets too big, then we need to take action to fix that. As we talked about, there's one of two things you can do. One, you can provide a refund or return of contributions to your highly compensated employees. This strategy would be lowering the bridge to reduce the gap between the bridge and the water. Or number two, you can make an employer contribution into the plan through a QNEC, and that raises the water closer to the level of the bridge to close the gap. The other thing we're going to talk a lot about in this webinar are ways that you can raise your actual deferral percentage of your non-highly compensated employees, raising that water to close the gap without having to make that year-end employer contribution to do so. Now, you are allowed to have a gap. That's why it's called permitted disparity. The size of the gap is all going to depend upon the level of contribution of your non-highly compensated employees. As you can see from the chart below, there's 3 different ranges and 3 different highly compensated employee limits that correspond to that. So for most people, their range falls somewhere between 2 and 8%. And if that's the case for you, then you take your non-highly compensated employees' actual deferral percentage, or ADP, and you add 2% to that to determine what your highly compensated employee limit would be. So hypothetically, someone has a 4.5% non-highly compensated average deferral percentage. That, when you add 2 to it, would become 6.5%, and that's the limit for your highly compensated employees as a group. So if they contribute over 6.5%, your test is going to fail. So let's look at an example here of discrimination testing. This will help put some things into motion and hopefully help solidify a few concepts in your mind. So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at salaries. So in this particular company, you've got $10 million of salary for your highly compensated and $56 million in salary for your non-highly compensated. Okay? Starting off good. Now we look at the contributions that those groups have made. So $10 million of salary and a $580,000 contribution for the highly compensated employees, $56 million in salary, and $1.3 million in contributions for the non-highly compensated employees. You know, on the surface, things look pretty good. We have more contributions by the non-highly compensated than the highly compensated, so maybe things are moving well and moving in the right direction. So as we keep doing this, now we're going to look at that as a total percentage of salary. So 508% is your total deferral percentage for your highly compensated, and 2,092 is your total deferral percentage for your non-highly compensated. Okay, on paper, still looking good. Now we come down and we look at how many highly compensated employees and non-highly compensated employees we have. And then from there, we find the actual deferral percentage for each person. And again, this is based on an average, so we'll talk more about some of these results in a second, but now this is where we get our numbers. So in this case, we have 5.91% is the ADP, or actual deferral percentage, for your highly compensated employees, and 2.02% is your actual deferral percentage, or ADP, for your non-highly compensated employees. Now, as we talked about a second ago, if your actual deferral percentage for your non-highly compensated employees falls between a 2 and 8% range, then you get to add 2% to that, and that becomes the level of your bridge, or the highly compensated employee limit for your company. So in this case, when we add 2%, we get 4.02%. So the test is going to fail because 5.91% is greater than 4.02%. Now, it's not unusual to fail discrimination testing, but improving your testing results are all about making numbers work in your favor. And the more that you understand how the numbers work, the easier it becomes to create strategies to improve your results. So when we look at these testing components, what helps and what hurts? Well, what helps improve your testing results is having more employees actively contributing, having higher employee deferrals as a percentage of their income, and fewer eligible participants contributing nothing. As we talked about a minute ago, that average is going to include all eligible employees, even those that are not contributing anything. So those zeros in your formula, whether they be in highly compensated employees or non-highly compensated employees, are going to drag your averages down significantly. So what hurts your discrimination testing? Low participation rates and low deferral rates. Typically speaking, the biggest problems with discrimination testing are for companies that have very low participation and very low deferrals and have had a hard time over the years increasing participation. Does it matter if you fail testing? Well, it's not an offense that you're going to go to 401k jail for. It certainly is going to impact your highly compensated employees because likely what you're going to do to fix your test is return a portion of their contributions to them, unless you fix your test by remedying with a qualified non-elective contribution or a QNEC. So what are some of the other potential impacts? Well, one, uncomfortable conversations with your highly compensated employees, telling that they now have a portion of their contributions coming back to them as income, and as income that has not been taxed. Also, a failed test typically hits employees in the $120,000 to $150,000 a year salary range the hardest. Persistent failures restrict highly compensated long-term ability to save for retirement. And a failed test could also result in the loss of employer matching contributions to your highly compensated employees. So not only do you have the potential of telling them they need to get money back, and they're going to have to pay income tax on that, but now you also could have some highly compensated employees that are not going to receive the full amount of employer matching contributions. When we have clients that are failing discrimination testing, we try to help them look at some basic strategies to help improve their results on a go-forward basis. As with any strategy, it's going to come down to a couple different elements. One is going to be, will it add employer costs? And number two will be, how much employee friction is involved in this particular strategy? So one of the first things we look at is for our clients who offer a match and are still failing testing, is there a way that we could adjust that match, adjust the level or the target of that match to help improve testing results? So for example, some clients will offer a very generous match, so 100% on the first 2% as an example, which again, from an employee's perspective is very generous. They get a dollar for dollar match on the first 2% they contribute, but what we've learned about participant behavior is that they tend to contribute at a level that the employer is willing to match on. So in that particular company, likely a large percentage of their population will be contributing 2% because that's what the employer matches on. In rethinking that match in a way that might improve testing results, what could we do? Well, if the employer does not want to spend more money, we could change that match from 100% on the first 2% to 50% on 4%, or 33% on 6, or 25% on 8. All of these would have roughly the same financial impact, but would give the employees a much higher target range to receive the company match. As a result, you'd likely see a lot of employees increasing their contributions, which would raise the actual deferral percentage of your non-highly compensated employees and allow your highly compensated employees to keep more money in the plan. This would add employee friction likely because you're going to have to communicate about the match. People are going to have to change their contribution rates, but it would not likely add a lot of employer cost. If you don't have a match and you're failing testing, well, you can certainly look at adding a match. Obviously, if you're adding a match, you're going to be adding cost. Probably not a lot of employee friction there, as if you don't have a match, that'd probably be received pretty well by your employee population. But nonetheless, you should, as we talked about a second ago, if you are going to add a match, think about what your match targets are going to be. The last thing you want to do is add a match and not have it have the desired impact on your testing results. As we've talked about a few times, if you're failing testing, you do have the ability to make a QNEC. There's no employee friction here because they're getting free money in their accounts and they don't have to do anything for it. However, that is going to add cost to the company. You do have the ability to make a safe harbor match. Again, this can be very costly depending upon the formula or your current matching level if you're offering a match. And don't forget the trade-off in that you have to make the money that you're contributing immediately vested for employees. So safe harbor is a great strategy as it will automatically allow you to pass your discrimination testing, but it does come with a reasonably high employee cost. Automatic enrollment is a concept that we'll talk about more in a second, but this concept, if you decide to explore it, allows you to automatically enroll employees who are eligible into your retirement plan. You'll choose a target deferral percentage for them to contribute at, but as people will be automatically enrolled or negative enrollment, they don't have to make a positive election to join the plan. What we've seen with a lot of employees is their natural state is going to be in neutral, meaning that they're not going to do anything until a lot of inertia or a lot of energy is expended to do so. So what automatic enrollment does is it takes the decision out of the employee's hands and puts them into the plan at a certain rate of contribution automatically. So in essence, what it allows you to do is bring more people into the plan, which gets rid of a lot of zeros in your formula and is going to raise your water and start to close the gap between the water and the bridge. Automatic enrollment is a very effective tool. However, it is going to add friction to your employee population. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And if you have a match, it's going to add cost to your employer contribution. On top of automatic enrollment, there's a concept of plan re-enrollment. So depending upon your contribution rates and your deferral rates and your participation rates, plan re-enrollment is the next step beyond automatic enrollment, as this allows you to go back and look at all employees that are eligible, whether they're new employees, legacy employees, employees that are contributing a little bit or a lot to the plan, and you're essentially going to re-enroll nearly the entire plan at a chosen deferral percentage. So let's say you decide that 6% is the rate at which you're going to re-enroll all plan participants. Anyone who's eligible and not contributing at least 6% in the plan under plan re-enrollment would now be enrolled in the plan as of the date you make it effective. Anyone contributing 6% or more, they're not going to be impacted. So depending upon your demographics and your participation rate, this could potentially be a very disruptive strategy, but a very effective strategy in improving your testing results. So this is high on employee friction, and depending upon what your matching costs are or your matching formula is, this also could potentially add employer costs. The last thing we talk about, and this has been a concept that's been around for a long time, has been to increase employee education. So whether it be working with your record keeper or your consultant or some other outside third party, but to help your employees understand more about the benefits of participating in a 401k plan, both the short-term and long-term benefits, and using kind of the carrot versus the stick to help increase your 401k participation. Again, taking a little bit more of a encouraging strategy here versus a strategy based on plan design such as automatic enrollment or plan re-enrollment to raise the water to close your gap. What we've seen historically is education is a wonderful tool and certainly helps employees feel good and feel better about the plan. However, the results tend to be slow and take time to kick in, as not all employees will attend education meetings, and even those that do, many won't take the desired actions that you're looking to improve your testing results. If you fail your discrimination test, one of the things that we really recommend you do is to have a conversation with your administrator. There's a lot of things that you can learn about why you failed your test and maybe just some strategies to pursue even in this year that would make things better. So there's two primary ways that testing is conducted. One is what's called your prior year testing, which it looks at the previous year's non-highly compensated employee contribution rates to set the maximum recommended rate for your highly compensated employees. So for example, today we're in 2016 and we're doing testing for 2015. So if we were on the prior year testing method, you would look into what your non-highly compensated employee contribution rates were in 2014, so that in 2015 you would set a recommended contribution rate for your highly compensated employees. So some employers that have been failing testing for a while, they like the concept of prior year testing because each year they can look at their highly compensated employees and say, don't contribute more than 6%, 7%, whatever the number is, or you might get a refund at the end of the year. So this allows you to manage your highly compensated employees and manage the size of their refunds. The advantage to that, highly compensated employees shouldn't be surprised. If they contribute over a certain amount, they'll likely get a refund. However, the disadvantage is there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be restricted and not able to fully max out their contributions. Under the current year testing method, which is the second strategy, this strategy looks at the current rate of contributions in the current year of your non-highly compensated employees. So many people will look at current year testing if they're taking proactive steps to improve the participation and contribution rates amongst their employee population. If you were to use prior year and you've been doing a lot of work, whether it's adding automatic enrollment, changing your match, doing a lot of employee education, whatever it is, but if you're expending a lot of energy to improve your deferral, your contribution rates and your participation rates, then why not take advantage of that in the year that you're doing it and elect current year testing? Permitted disaggregation is another concept that allows you to separately test employees who are younger than 21 with less than 1 year of service. So if you have a lot of short-term employee turnover, or if you have a lot of young employees, this is an option where you can exclude some of these people from the test and potentially improve your testing results. What we've seen from a lot of short-term employees, or when you have a lot of turnover, many of them aren't participating in your test and can drag your averages down if they're still included. So this allows you to use a more liberal eligibility and entry date and not affect your testing results. So for example, you could hypothetically let people into your plan with 30 days of service and monthly entry. However, you can look from a testing perspective only at people that are 21 and have at least 1 year of service with your company. So just a strategy to pursue with your administrator and ask them if that's something that would benefit your testing results. Another option to consider is the top 20% option. This looks at your total workforce and allows you to use the top 20% to conduct your discrimination testing and determine who your highly compensated employees are. Now, this option is really beneficial if you have a lot of highly compensated employees as a percentage of your workforce. So, for example, if you had more than half of your workforce as highly compensated employees, well, you wouldn't have to look at all of them to determine the actual deferral percentage of your highly compensated employee population. If you choose this option, you'd only have to look at the top 20%. Finally, you can explore QNex or QMax. So the qualified non-elective contribution, which we've talked about a couple times, sometimes this is going to be a very prohibitively expensive option, and it'll be a non-starter. Other times, a QNEC might actually make a lot of sense, and it will allow you to pass your discrimination testing without a lot of out-of-pocket. Regardless of what you pursue, work with your administrator to run mock tests to see if some potential changes or new strategies are going to have the desired impact that you're looking for. We referenced automatic enrollment briefly, but let's talk about automatic enrollment and automatic increases or escalation as strategies to raise the water and close the gap between the non-highly compensated and the highly compensated actual deferral percentages. Now, automatic enrollment, this originated back in 1998, and it allowed employers to make negative elections for newly eligible employees. In 2000, the IRS further amended this and allowed negative elections for eligible participants who contribute less than your automatic enrollment rate. So this is coming back to the concept of plan re-enrollment. The Pension Protection Act offered additional employer protections and really accelerated the implementation of automatic enrollment in 401k plans. As we sit in 2016, automatic enrollment is used by more than 50% of plans. And one of the key advantages to automatic enrollment is that as we've looked at the statistics over the last 10 or so years where automatic enrollment has really gained popularity, less than 10% of employees who are automatically enrolled opt out. So if you look at your plan participation rate and you're looking for ways that you can quickly increase contributions and participation in your plan, automatic enrollment is a great tool, as again, what we've seen is the opt-out rate is very, very low. Now, one of the important things is when you are implementing automatic enrollment, you have to set a deferral percentage of what employees will enter the plan at. So for example, you could set it at 3%, 5%, 8%, whatever number you want, but you have to set a percentage when you implement automatic enrollment. One of the things that we always encourage our employers to look at is to ensure that you're setting a deferral percentage that's going to help you with your testing results. Some people will say, well, automatic enrollment is new, we don't want to disrupt our employee population, and they set their automatic enrollment percentage at 2%, thinking that that's a way that they can use automatic enrollment but not disrupt their employee population. Well, what you actually find out is when you implement automatic enrollment at 2%, you're going to have a lot of people come into the plan at 2%. Maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't, but it likely is not going to have as big of an impact as you would want it to. What we have seen over the years is that 10% opt-out rate does not vary much by contribution rate. So 3%, 5%, 7%, even up to 8%, that opt-out rate does not increase very much. So what we've seen a lot of employers do over the years is start with a little bit more of an aggressive automatic enrollment rate, for example, 6%, whereas in prior years, people would have started at a much lower rate. So think about that deferral percentage rate when you are implementing automatic enrollment and work with your administrator to look at options and look at a rate that would best help your discrimination testing results. Coupled with automatic enrollment is the concept of automatic increases or automatic escalation. This was introduced with the Pension Protection Act in 2006. Employers, if you're using automatic increases or escalation, may automatically increase an automatically enrolled participant's contribution rates. Well, that was a mouthful. So coming back to automatic enrollment, if you automatically enroll somebody at 5%, well, if they're automatically enrolled at 5%, they're going to stay at that 5% contribution until the employee decides to change it. And again, what we know about employee behavior, most employees are going to stay in that state of neutral or not do anything. So what automatic increases allow is that if someone is automatically enrolled in the plan, you as an employer can choose the option to have that participant's individual contribution rate increased by 1% or 2% a year until it reaches a set maximum. Usually that's around 10%. So for example, your employee who you automatically enrolled at 5%, next year their rate would increase to 6%, then 7, 8, 9, and then cap at 10%. So someone who's automatically enrolled year one when they join you and they've now been with you for 5 years, they're going to have a contribution rate of 10%. And again, the opt-out rates or the people that opt out of automatic increases are also incredibly low. So the auto feature suites, automatic enrollment and automatic increases, are very, very powerful tools that will have a big impact on your plan and on your participation rate. Coming back to our prior conversations, you need to look at cost and you need to look at how much friction this will cause within your employee population before you decide to proceed with either of these strategies. Now on to some more advanced strategies. A couple plan changes that people might consider is looking at your definition of compensation. A couple categories here would be looking at compensation net of salary deferrals or potentially excluding bonuses, overtime, commissions, or other sources of compensation from salary contributions. This could have a positive impact on your discrimination test, but you should really talk to your administrator and see if that would have the desired impact. Also, one aspect, when you start to carve up your definition of compensation and start to exclude certain portion of compensation from 401k contribution eligibility, you will have to start performing some additional discrimination testing to make sure that those exclusions of certain areas of compensation are not discriminatory. Another thing that employers will look at is a classification or location carve-out. So if you have certain groups within your population that are just not likely or not going to participate, you have the ability to carve them out, whether that be by job class, by location, or any other method that would allow you to put a rope around those employees. One of the popular misconceptions around 401k plans is that everyone has to be offered the plan. That certainly makes it easier and certainly allows you to pass one of the discrimination tests, which is coverage testing. However, it's not required that every employee be offered the 401k plan. So in extreme cases where you have groups that are just not going to participate in the 401k plan no matter what you do have the ability to carve them out so long as you still meet your coverage test, again, which is another type of discrimination testing that you would have to do. As a rule of thumb, you can carve out up to 30% of your employee population if you're going to cover all of your highly compensated employees in your company. So that gives you some flexibility, and there's some additional strategies that you can pursue if you talk to your administrator that can be really creative and could bring some benefits to the company. Again, one thing to think about here, how much employee friction are you going to create if you carve out or tell certain groups of your population that they're not eligible to participate in the plan? For some companies, it's a non-event. For other companies, it could create a lot of chaos. Finally, for budget stretchers or people that are looking for a lot of bang for their buck, you can look at a concept called performance-based matching contributions. Essentially, what this allows you to do is make a discretionary year-end matching contribution that's tied to company performance. So this can provide a very positive message for employees, but also allow some financial flexibility for the company. This would go something like this. In 2016, we're introducing a matching contribution. However, the amount and whether or not we fund that matching contribution is not going to be determined in 2017. If you want to be eligible for the full amount of match that you might receive, you should contribute at least 6% to the 401k plan. Once the year is done and we're now into early 2017, you can sit down with your finance team and look at how the company did versus goals. If you met or exceeded your financial goals and there's a pool of money that can be applied to a matching contribution, you can now go back and apply that match to the 2016 planned year and fund it in 2017 prior to filing your tax return. So the performance-based matching contribution is a great tool where it can give you some flexibility to provide the employees with a positive message around the company's willingness to share in the good fortunes of the company through a 401k match, but again, still provide your finance team with the flexibility of doing it at the end of the year after the results have been determined, rather than having to commit to making a payroll-by-payroll match. The last idea here is you don't have to provide matching to your entire population. For some people, if you offer a match and you don't quite have the budget you're looking for to offer it to everyone, maybe just offer the match only to non-highly compensated employees. You'd certainly have to explain to your highly compensated employees why they're not getting a match, but if you offer a match to your non-highly compensated employees and structure it appropriately, you might be able to raise the water and increase their participation and deferral rates to a level where your highly compensated would be able to contribute enough towards their retirement and still pass testing. Another advanced strategy is looking at what's called a non-qualified deferred compensation plan. Now, this is a separate plan that would operate outside of the 401k. Typically, your executives and other highly compensated employees are going to be eligible, and a plan like this is not going to cover non-highly compensated employees. Offering a deferred compensation plan would allow your highly compensated employees and employees that are eligible for the deferred compensation plan the ability to make pre-tax contributions that are not subject to discrimination testing. The company can also make matching or other employee contributions just like you would in a 401k or a profit sharing plan as a benefit or as an additional incentive for people to participate in the deferred compensation plan. Now, there are risks, balance sheet implications, and other limitations that you need to explore before offering a deferred compensation plan. However, if you've gone through years of failing testing and just are not making a lot of progress, one reason that people do offer non-qualified deferred compensation plans is to provide their executives and highly compensated employees more flexibility to make pre-tax contributions towards their retirement. In summary, there are easy fixes to discrimination testing, however, they can be expensive. Talk to your administrator about testing results and ways to improve them. As you're pursuing strategies, make sure you balance the employer cost with the employee friction. And make sure you run mock tests to forecast your results prior to taking action. The last thing you want to do is to spend a lot of time and energy and not have that move you towards the result you're looking for. As a reminder, 401k Fridays has a whole host of resources available for employers. We have periodic emails that will go out that provide timely, strategic, and actionable advice to help employers get the most out of their retirement plans. We have podcast interviews where we conduct interviews with industry experts to help uncover new best practices and provide valuable perspective on current events. We offer webinars twice a year and in-person seminars twice a year for employers based in Southern California. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to this video presentation by 401k Fridays. To request a copy of the presentation or be notified of future events, please send me an email to runser@lockton.com. Thank you again for taking the time, and make your Friday a 401k Friday.